Hello, and welcome to Dedicated Devoted. I'm your host, Jared Colenbell.
And I'm your co-host, Cora Colenbell.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how the demon rats are taking America back. The Democratic National Convention Day 1 is done, and so today we're going to be taking a look at some of the highlights of the convention.
Before we unpack today's episode, just a reminder of how you can support the podcast. If you haven't already, please check out DedicatedDevoted.com to learn more about the podcast, some awesome ways that you can support us, and how to live a dedicated, devoted life. Onto the show.
So, on a previous episode, this was an episode titled Breaking News. Do you recall that episode, Cora?
Yes, I listened to it today.
Okay. Breaking news. The glass ceiling is shattered. So on a previous episode, we talked about this concept of the glass ceiling, and I feel so good about myself. Do you know why I feel so good about myself?
Yes, I do, but why don't you tell everyone else why you feel so good about yourself?
Well, I feel so good about myself because in a previous podcast episode, I covered with some levity the topic of breaking the glass ceiling, and it just so happens today that we have another publication by my favorite publisher.
Which is?
You take a guess. It's a really resourceful and truthful media outlet.
I don't think that exists, but what is it?
The New York Times.
Nice.
If you recall, in a previous episode, we actually we took a deeper dive into 19 facts about Tim Walz, and we talked about his Midwestern dad vibes. That was one of the 19 facts. Mm-hmm. So helpful. One of the 19 facts that was really important about Tim Walz. But this was an article that was produced by a couple of writers from the New York Times. And so today it just so happens we have another article from my favorite outlet, from my favorite publication, the New York Times. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to actually preface this with something very, very important and very serious. So I'm obviously very energetic about this topic, but I want to say that we have a lot of hypocrites and a lot of propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
There is a lot of that right now. And I think that there's a lot of people who are sleepy. Do you know who is the chief sleeper?
No.
Joe Biden. He's so tired. So we need to wake up. And this episode is really about a call to get serious, get involved, and wake up. Cora, do you know how many more days until we actually hit election day?
I don't know the exact day, but I know it's coming up soon, right? November?
November.
Mm-hmm.
It's this many days. 77 days from today.
Wow.
We have 77 days from today, and here is what's happening in the United States of America. We have right now a very contentious race for the presidency, but we also have extreme levels of hypocrisy and really, in my opinion, malicious intent. I think that there's things that are happening that people are so sleepy they don't recognize what is occurring right before their eyes. One of the things I mentioned to you earlier was we have this concept from this day one of the Democratic National Convention where they're really making this a mantra, and the mantra is passing the torch. Mm-hmm. You heard that a little bit earlier. We were watching through some clips.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the mantra passing the torch?
Yeah, totally.
Do you know sort of what it symbolizes?
I mean, just if I had to guess, just in like what I've seen or heard, it's like you're done with your part of whatever it is, like a race. And so then you give that to the next person. Now it's their turn to go ahead and take it and finish the race or get to the next level, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a super great explanation. But actually it comes from the Oregon riots where Democrat-controlled areas were allowing Antifa to burn stuff, and one guy would hand the torch to the other guy.
You're not giving real facts, are you?
That's passing the torch. We're talking about passing the Democratic torch, okay?
Okay.
It's obviously a joke.
Yeah, obviously. But I thought you were serious for a second, so.
Well, yes, everybody has a passing the torch event, and with Antifa, it was simply listen, I need to burn this building down. So if you can hand me that burning object you have, I can use it to go start this thing on fire.
Okay, so my answer was better then.
Yes, it was just, it was different.
It wasn't as exciting, but, it was more accurate probably.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to passing the torch, it's really a symbolic gesture of going from old regime to new regime.
Okay.
We're actually going to see this here in the article today. And I think it's going to be a little bit enlightening. But this concept of passing the torch, I want to make it super clear because I think there's a lot of people who are very sleepy to the subject. And if you take offense to that, I would simply say, don't just wake up, pay attention. I think for some of us, we've been paying attention. Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
I've been getting the tar beat out of me over a lawsuit, a religious-based lawsuit against my former employer.
Yeah.
And I've said literally nothing for years. And this podcast has been the first outlet in which I've been able to express my dismay, displeasure, and disappointment with all of the things that I've been going through. But I can tell you one thing. I haven't had time to sleep on this matter.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to stay awake, and I've had to been alive and active because there's real evil stuff going on in the world, specifically against people who are fighting for their rights and their beliefs and their religiously protected rights, to be more specific.
Yeah.
This concept of passing the torch, we're probably going to miss this if we're a little bit sleepy, which is why I'm encouraging listeners to wake up, perk your ears up, pay a little bit of attention, because what is happening right now with the Democrats is they're recategorizing what they're doing with Joe being the nominee and then all of a sudden Kamala being the nominee.
Yeah.
And they're saying, and Joe said this in his speech for the Democratic National Convention on day one, he said he was officially passing the torch. Here's a different question. How is it that Kamala became the front runner for the Democratic nominee for the presidency? How is that?
I think it just all has to do with money.
Money follows 100% because this campaign had money, and really, this campaign is about well-funded propaganda.
Yeah.
And so the question is how is it that somebody who is so disliked, they couldn't even get one delegate vote when they tried for the presidency? If you recall, there was Kamala participated along with Joe Biden in the debates because she was running for president and she didn't have a good platform and people hated her. And by the way, her approval ratings are, they're dismal. They're terrible. How is it that this woman who people just didn't like, including folks from her own party, Democrats didn't even like Kamala Harris. How is it that all of a sudden a torch is being passed to Kamala Harris? What do you think?
I think it's definitely very surprising because I know even before any of this happened, I would just kind of think about how often I would see her or hear her talk, and it wasn't very often, you know what I mean, or very important conversations, I guess. So it just felt like, I don't know, there was like a time where it didn't seem like she was anywhere around. Like I didn't know where she was, you know? So I was really surprised because it's like she was just kind of quiet. You didn't really hear about her.
Absent.
So, oh yeah, like no one talked about her at all. Like you didn't see her. No one talked about her. Like it's like she was not around, I guess.
Her presence as the vice president, that was a tongue twister. That was very hard.
You did.
Her presence as vice president reminds me of a song. And I'm not a singer or a musician, so you're going to have to help me on this one. But it goes a little something like this. I can play the background. I can play the background. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay.
I cannot help you.
Oh, it's like an R&B song.
No, maybe you're singing it wrong. Who sings it?
I can play the background. It's going to hit you. And then when it does,
You're probably not singing it
I
right.
want you to come back and cue in the audience on what we're talking about.
Is
okay?
it a guy or a girl?
I think it's a guy.
I can play the background?
I can play the background. So anyhow, as we proceed, you can feel free to Google And if Dr. Google gives us a good answer,
Yeah, I'm gonna look up that.
yeah, most certainly find
no
it.
idea.
But that's what her vice presidency reminds me of.
Yeah.
Somebody who played the background, and then all of a sudden she's in the foreground, and you go, where did you come from? By the way, as the borders are, she was just terrible. But I want to go back to this concept of passing the torch from the old regime to the new regime, because something happened here and sleepy Americans are gonna miss it. Are you still with me, Cora?
Yeah, I think I found the song now.
You did. You found the song. Can you go ahead and can you share with the audience what it is?
I don't even know this song. It's by Lecrae.
Lecrae, that's
See,
it.
I don't listen to Lecrae.
Yes.
That's why I don't know it. But I'm looking up the lyrics, and that's who it is. But I don't listen to that person.
Lecrae, he's fantastic.
Okay.
Great Christian rapper. One of the greats. Okay, so I'm going to play it for you later on.
Okay.
And you'll understand where I'm coming from, and you're going to go, that was great.
Okay.
So when it comes to this concept of passing the torch, before we jump into the article, here's what I don't want sleepy America to miss. Something happened with this idea of passing the torch. And nobody's going to say it in a super blunt way, and I think that we ought to. I know other folks are talking about it, but this is a coup, folks. This is what happens when democracy is broken and the people don't get to select who they want. And then when somebody's forced upon them, they all rally as if they had a choice.
Yeah, that's the weird part for sure.
Did you see any of these pictures from the Democratic National Convention?
No, I don't think I saw the pictures. I saw some people's faces, but I didn't see like actual pictures taken.
This is what some of the audience looks like. When Joe Biden came out, they started holding up "We Love Joe" signs and chanting "We Love Joe."
Yeah.
You want to know what I say to that?
What?
If you love Joe so much, why didn't you keep him?
Because they can't.
They can't.
No, they can't.
Because it's a coup.
Yeah.
But what happened in this propagandist state? Everybody just in unison was chanting, "We love Joe. We love Joe." Well, guess what? Joe's no longer on the docket.
Yeah.
Because it's a coup. It's not a handing of the torch. What happens when you hand something over is you relinquish that willingly.
Yeah, no, totally. Like, and it's, you hand it over willingly, but I feel like there's also a sense of satisfaction of like handing it to the next person. Not really like, I couldn't do my part, so here you go. It's more like, I did the best that I can do, and here you go. It doesn't feel like it's forced, but in this situation, it seems a little forced.
He was sad when he was actually going through his speech.
Well, he said he wasn't going to give it up either. At one point, he was like, "I'm totally going to do this," and then a little bit of time later,
I will not give up.
Yeah, I thought he was going to continue because that's what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, so I actually seen this when I was going through the lawsuit with my former employer. We had somebody that was very high up that was supporting our initiatives, and he disappeared.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people who wasn't very sleepy. I was paying attention to everything that was happening, and I was looking at the nuances. Most folks don't look at the nuances of circumstances, and that's where all of the rich detail resides.
Yeah.
You look at the nuances and you go, that was weird. And you're like, wait, he's not responding to emails. He's not answering calls. He's not getting back to us. He just said he was going to go and he was going to vie for what we're doing. What just happened?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it strikes a very odd chord. And then you get the news of, oh, I'm moving on and I'm retiring early. And you go,
how convenient.
Whoa. Yeah, how convenient. You go, what happened? So I've been through this and I've experienced it. And it was just like a play-by-play repeat of what I had seen in the past. You have a man who doesn't follow the agenda. Now, here is what happened is Joe Biden successfully implemented leftist democratic policies.
Yeah.
He ushered in a new era, and I do believe he's passing the torch, and he's passing the torch to radicals. These are people who have no regard for America. They chant for freedom. They chant for equality. And then what they do is they stomp on the head of people who are trying to provide for their families, who are trying to do the right thing, and who are constitutionalists. It makes me sick, to be honest with you. And then you see a man who is used and abused, and who also used and abused.
Yeah, for sure.
Be ushered out like an old, frail, elderly dementia patient. And then you have somebody else that they say, this is the new regime, but there's no choice in it.
Well, I think we'll have to like listen to his speech again. But one thing that I noticed about that was it seemed like when he didn't know what to say next, the crowd just started saying, "We love Joe, we love Joe." And I wonder if it's like a cue. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know we didn't talk about this at all, but I noticed that a few times where like it's like he was talking and then all of a sudden like he would get kind of quiet for a second or like not, it's like you didn't know where he was going to go with it. And then the crowd just started chanting that. And I thought, I wonder if there's something, around the stadium or something that kind of lets the crowd know, like start saying something because it just doesn't look good for him. But I don't know that.
I bet you anything that what they did is they have some sort of mechanism that when they chant, "We love Joe," it keeps his pacemaker going.
No.
It keeps him alive, so it's like, keep going.
And again, I could be wrong. That's just what I noticed in watching his speech, where it just seemed like when there's that absence, then all of a sudden you just hear the crowd start saying something and it's like, that's kind of weird. It's a weird timing.
There's something very interesting about these events when you watch them.
Yeah.
Take a look at propaganda through history, and you're going to see these nuances that I speak of. Mm-hmm. How is it that a collective group of people can all buy into an ideology, a philosophy, a thought process in unison, even though when people disagree? And so I think that really what we're seeing is there's a lot of groupthink and there's a lot of camaraderie. And so maybe everybody in that audience believes that. I don't know. But what I can say is these crowds get energized in a very specific way. And I'm going to be honest with you. Some people can agree, some people can disagree, but I see extreme demonic influence in a lot of these type of events. I saw people crying. We saw a reverend come out and he gave a prayer, and I'm going, oh my gosh, how is it? This is just so disjointed. You have it wasn't a reverend, it was an archbishop, okay? Yeah. So the archbishop came out and he gave a prayer, and I'm going, okay, so the party of death, the Democratic Party, we know that the Democratic Party right now, this was much different 4 years ago, and this was much different even 8 years ago.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party right now is so enthralled and enamored with abortion that it's become their platform. And we're going to see this here in just a moment. And then you have a archbishop come out and give a prayer over this event for people who clearly have a disdain for life.
Yeah.
What's wrong here? We see a complete disconnect. What is energizing these groups? Who is energizing these groups? Are they just a collective of folks? Is there some sort of mentality that has been instilled in them? Or is there a spirit? I had mentioned before that for 2 millennia now, more than 2 millennia, from the foundations of the world, there have been demonic influences. And those same demonic influences are still around till today. And I see stuff like this and I go, there is much demonic activity and energy around these activities. Remember what the devil's trying to do. The devil is trying to mirror all good things that God does and destroy all stuff that God owns and does. And I look at this and I go, this is a really sad thing. Now, here's the big wake-up call. We are seeing a coup happen right in front of our eyes. And I'm not a Democrat, but I'm going to say for the Democrats, they might want to pay attention because they do not have a candidate in which they elected, because it is somebody who has dismal support until she is thrust into the limelight and everybody's told this is your candidate. A coup is occurring right now and folks are very sleepy. And I can tell you, if America doesn't wake up, Republican, independent, libertarian, and Democrat, if they do not wake up, there is going to be a rude awakening for America. The Constitution is being disassembled before our very eyes with these ideologies. How long do you think it's going to be that we can just support the murdering of babies before God just goes, I am going to bring righteous judgment down upon your nation?
I have no idea.
I'll tell you right now, the Lord has lots of patience and he's willing to hold back, but we are a prosperous and blessed nation.
Yeah.
it's not always going to be like that. When you turn your back on God, this is the story and the history of the Israelites and Israel and Judah. God blesses you because you look towards him and you seek really his ways, his desires, his will. And then when they turned their back, they got wiped out.
Yeah.
Time after time after time. When they went to Egypt and they were exiled to Egypt, it was because they did wicked things in the sight of the Lord. We're going to see, I think, some things, very important things. We got 77 days. I think we're going to see some very important things unfold within those 77 days. But more than anything, the question is what happens in 78 days? What happens during the inauguration period in January? We're going to see some things. You and I, our listeners, they're going to see some things. And I think God is doing a great work. And it's my hope that we truly do not have somebody such as Kamala Harris in office. But it's also my understanding that we have not honored God as a society and a nation the way that we should have. And I have no doubt that God will put who he wants where they want, whether it's as a punishment or it's as a blessing.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's take a look at this article, and it is written by Nicholas Nihamas. I think I read that correctly. And it is from the NewYorkTimes.com, and it is titled, Kamala Harris Unexpectedly Took the Stage and Hillary Clinton Delivered an Emotional Speech. And these are the highlights from night one of the Democratic National Convention. So here are some of the highlights. Actually, let me go back here real quick. I want to read a couple of things here. So let's start right here. This is going to be President Biden speaking. America, I gave my best to you, Mr. Biden said. For 50 years, like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation, and I've been blessed 1,000,000 times in return with the support of the American people. Mr. Biden's speech and another earlier in the night from Hillary Clinton, wicked woman, by the way, who came closer than any other American woman to winning the White House, symbolized how Democrats are moving on from the old guard that has led their parties for decades. That's the passing of the torch. The convention's opening night also served to emphasize the historic nature of Miss Harris's candidacy and to frame her as riding on the shoulders of civil rights icons and women who had run for president before her as she seeks to defeat former President Donald J. Trump. Here are other highlights from the night. Number one was a surprise appearance. Miss Harris unexpectedly took the stage to thank Mr. Biden for his lifetime of service to our nation. Her appearance to the pounding rhythm of Beyonce's Freedom. How does that song go?
I don't know that song.
Freedom, freedom,
Beyonce?
freedom. It's 3. Well, I don't know.
She sings that?
No, that's a different one.
Yeah, this is Beyonce. I don't listen to her really.
All right. Well, her appearance to the pounding rhythm of Beyonce's Freedom energized the crowd. Remember earlier when I said that I think demonic activity stirs up these crowds?
Yeah.
Okay. Do me a favor. It's the nuances in which we see things. Just to look at what kind of music is playing in these venues and how people start to act and think alike. Okay. Mm-hmm. So now we're listening to Beyonce's Freedom song, and it energized the crowd on a night when they had gathered to hear Mr. Biden say goodbye. He's still the president.
Yeah, he is.
He's still the president, and he's saying goodbye. Isn't it weird? Because something happened behind the scenes, and most of us just don't want to talk about it. We haven't seen him. He hasn't been active. The question is who has really been running the White House for the last 4 years, almost 4 years?
Yeah, I think it's been some time that he really hasn't been doing it for some time now.
Well, America's starting to become suspicious. Mm-hmm. As soon as we saw his debate performance against former President Trump, we thought to ourselves, who's been running things?
I don't even think it was then was our first sign.
It was
It
before.
was way before. Like, I think that's when
He got in a boxing match with the stairs. That was one of them.
There's been a few, but I think
when he fell on his bike.
Yeah, well, I think the debate though was just like everyone had to sit and listen, and it was going to be like live, like, you know what I mean? So
Uncurated.
yeah, where it wasn't like they can again throw out a crowd screaming whenever he's messing up or whatever. But I think that it was obvious before, but I think during that debate, it was really obvious that this man is not there anymore.
He's not all there.
No.
You know what the sign was for me when I knew that he wasn't the one that was in control?
I don't know your opinion on that or what the sign is for you, but yeah, go ahead. Tell me yours.
It was whenever things got real difficult and he had one of his wranglers go, "Joey, here's your ice cream."
Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
You haven't seen the pictures?
I've seen a lot of stuff with him, but it's usually him, like you said, falling downstairs or falling off a
No,
bike.
the last 18 months has been nothing but pictures of President Biden with ice cream.
I think because a lot of people do know his condition and they just kind of try to keep putting a Band-Aid over it versus just saying, he's really losing his mind and we need to do what's right. Instead of that, they just kind of went with it and let him embarrass himself. And I kind of feel like his wife should be ashamed of herself. That's just me, because if you were going crazy, I would definitely pull you out of whatever you thought, whatever you're speaking about or, who you're speaking in front of. But I feel really sad for him because he is just getting older. And some of those are just signs of getting older. But someone who does have the right mind needs to say, hey, let's step back and evaluate your mental health. But they didn't do that. And even if they did, they still kept him there until it was super obvious to everyone, or maybe it was just the right time for the Democrats.
Well, there's also something happening in the background where these wicked policies, some that I've undergone, right? My religious discrimination lawsuit has to do with forced leadership requirements.
Yeah.
Being told I have to have wicked people, even non-believers, lead me as a Christian, which is not a biblical concept, not a biblical precept. These are the kind of things that are being pushed in the background.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to keep the people who are senile quiet. Now, our viewers might be thinking I'm being quite harsh, that either I'm being blasphemous against President Biden or perhaps the elderly. And I want to make it a little bit clearer. I have a strong disdain for this man because of his disposition and his position regarding many things, including the open support of the murder of the unborn. So that's just me. And I think anybody who, these are hills that I'm willing to die on. I'll put it that way.
But I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I'm pretty sure that some of those values have changed with him too.
He used to support something called the Hyde Amendment. Mm-hmm. And that was that no taxpayer such as you and I would fund these sort of things, abortions.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want my money to go to sexual reassignment surgeries.
Yeah.
That was something that was happening in my previous role at my previous job.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to fund sexual reassignment surgeries. I don't want to fund abortion. These are things that I staunchly disagree with. And so this is why I have this, what might seem like an aggressive approach to what President Biden has done and who he is. And so these are hills that I'm willing to die on. So back to this highlight, a surprise appearance. Come on, of course she was going to appear, right? There has to be a passing of the torch from the old guard to the new guard.
Yeah.
Here's what has to happen. This has to be recognized publicly by all the people who are being brainwashed and not recognizing the nuances, who are sleepy, because eventually they are going to have to march in unison and in hatred for this woman. In hatred for what or who? If you watched all of that opening portion, the day one of the Democratic National Convention, every one of them that was going up, each one of those guest speakers, Raphael Warnock, Ocasio, what's her last name? Ortez, Cheese Whiz. I can't remember her name. I apologize, but she opened up by saying that she used to flip omelets 6 years ago and she was found on the roadside. And now she develops policies, right?
Yeah.
Sorry if I didn't have respect for her last name. Regardless, all these folks were claiming and saying how much they hated Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah.
Remember what I said on previous episodes? Community specifically. You can gather around something that you love and it's enduring. But if you gather around something that you hate, it's temporary.
Yeah.
This can never actually hold together, at least not for a sustainable duration.
Yeah.
So, of course, she was going to make this appearance. And let me go on and say here, she was obviously dancing to the pounding rhythm of Beyonce's Freedom, energizing the crowd on a night when they gathered to hear Mr. Biden say goodbye, even though he's still in office. Let us fight for the ideas we hold dear, and let us always remember, when we fight, we win. This is actually their mantra, and I think their mantra should be, when we fight, we win, and we sin. Do you like that?
Sure.
Oh, okay, so when we fight, we win, Miss Harris told the delegates, who roared back those last 5 words, which have become a rallying cry for the Democrats. Amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at what happened. You're missing the nuance there. When we fight, we win. That's a demonic chant. When we fight, we win. When they fight for what? Against who? This is really a battle for good versus evil. Nobody's catching this. And I'm not saying on the other side that Republicans are holier than thou.
Yeah.
Now, I do side with them because of their conservative stance and flair, but there's something happening there. Why don't you share with us the next one?
The glass ceiling.
Ooh. What does this point back to, Cora?
A few episodes back.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it amazing that I gave this analogy of Kamala Harris breaking the glass ceiling. And I did it a little bit as a joke, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because no glass ceiling was broke.
Yeah.
And you got to remember what the glass ceiling is.
Yeah.
It's where all of the intersectional folks are. They're actually on the floor beneath the glass ceiling. They're looking up through the glass ceiling, and they see Tim Walz up there because he's a rich, affluent, white male.
Yeah.
And they go, I want to go hang out with Walz. And so then Hillary Clinton puts Kamala on her shoulders, and they get a really sharp tool to break the glass ceiling. But all kidding aside, it's really hilarious that this New York Times article actually says that one of the highlights from the night was the glass ceiling, because I talked about it before. What do you think of that?
I think it's very interesting.
You don't think that my previous thoughts around the proverbial glass ceiling were ridiculous now, do you?
No.
But you did then.
No, because
Okay,
you've done this stuff for a long time.
Yes.
You've always like said something, and then like it's the same with your last job, your previous job. You would always tell me like how things should be, or like what should have been done differently, and then people said, "Hey, shut up. Don't say nothing. We don't want your opinion." And then like you'd come to me like 6 months later and be like, "Do you remember that one idea I told you about 6 months ago?" And it was, I mean, this is like something that's been going on for a long time. So it doesn't really surprise me. And I think you think that I should be surprised, but I'm not surprised by it.
I just want to thank you for complimenting me on my gifts of discernment and forethought and foresight. I love you so much.
Yeah. For some things, it's good.
I put those words in your mouth, and I apologize for that. It was a joke.
You did. Go ahead.
The glass ceiling. Here's where things get very interesting. Miss Clinton told Democrats that the future is here. Soon after Miss Harris made her surprise appearance, I wish my mother and Kamala's mother could see us, Miss Clinton said in an emotional address that had nearly every delegate on their feet. They would say, keep going, she added. This is our time, America. This is when we stand up. This is when we break through. Again, I'm telling you, activities that are energized by a common energy, a common demonic energy. One of the things that disturbed me quite a bit was Hillary Clinton's position on how Kamala's going to support the military. And I got to tell you, I have lots of friends that are from the armed services, and people despise Hillary Clinton, specifically for her actions in Benghazi. She really should have been tried for the things that she did. But no, she wasn't. And then she has the gall to say such things. And the same thing with Kamala Harris. What has she done for troops?
I have no idea. She's never really explained what she's done in general.
I would agree. And I'm going to flip it a little bit and say, how much support did you and I see? And this is an independent question. How much support did you and I see from President Trump for our military service members and their families?
I would say a lot.
People loved him. Military families loved him. In private Bible studies and in private circles with friends, with folks that we knew that were that were military families, we knew that they had love for him. Yeah. And we heard things like, I'm thinking about getting out of the services because somebody's coming in and it's going to be a Democrat at the helm. There's a different spirit when you have a Republican versus a Democrat in the presidency and their support. Let me tell you specifically, watch what Republicans do when it comes to the military and money-wise, and watch what Democrats do. Democrats cut. Whenever they come in, they gut the military spending. And by the way, that's the way that we defend our sovereignty. Yeah. You build up the military machine. But you know what happens is you have all of these wacky ideologies that are like, no, defund the military machine. We're a world power. How do you think we stay sovereign? Yeah. And then watch what Republicans do. So anyhow, in this case, one of these really, really special highlights from the night was a surprise appearance and a shattering of the glass ceiling. The glass came down underneath Beyonce's Freedom song. That was Tim Waltz in the background going, Freedom! He was singing the wrong song like I was.
Yeah, I still don't know the song.
Well, there's no glass ceiling. This is all just a farce. And what we're really seeing is a coup. And I think folks need to be just absolutely awake because there are some really wicked things occurring right now. The next highlight says a diverse roster. The opening night speakers highlighted the Democrats' diversity as they celebrated Miss Harris, the first black woman. Black woman, we need to underline that. That right there is that identity politics that I was talking to you about. And remember, the intersectionality, the more things that you have that count against you as an oppressed group, the more bonus points that you get. I'm really surprised that they're not. Oh, let me keep reading. My apologies. The first black woman and person of South Asian descent. That's the first time that anybody's mentioning this. Mm-hmm. She went from being of South Asian descent to black and South Asian descent. And here's what people will do with these sort of comments. They're going to come back and they're going to say, Jared, you are so hypocritical and you are so hateful and you're a bigot and you're a piece of garbage because you attack people based on their color. And you know what I would say?
No.
This is all identity politics. And in a relativist world, I can identify as whatever I want.
Yeah.
So maybe at one moment, I'm just some white dude. At another moment, I'm just a Polynesian guy. I'm doing whatever's comfortable to me. Because anybody can do that. Why? Because here's the example. A black woman and person of South Asian descent to lead a major party ticket for president. She's there because of the money. And they needed to expend the money, and they can't use the money in any other way. And they had too short of a time to try to get a real candidate in place. 77 days to point out all of these falsehoods so that sleepy America can wake up. That's why we're talking about this. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. Moving on in the article, it says, and this is the South Asian descent to lead a major party ticket for president, period. And then the next sentence, many were women who spanned the generations and included all races. An unmistakable node to the glass ceiling Miss Harris is seeking to break. Okay. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
That's her name.
Cheese Whiz.
Cortez.
Of New York gave a spirited speech to a crowd that chanted her initials. AOC. AOC.
They probably can't pronounce her whole name. That's why.
They can't.
Yeah.
That's why I just call her Cheese Whiz.
Cheese Whiz. Okay, go ahead.
And then it says, Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles spoke of her decades-long relationship with Miss Harris. this is more propaganda. What they're trying to do is say that she's breaking a glass ceiling. But let's not forget, she didn't do here's how you break the glass ceiling. For your VP pick, you choose a woman of color, and that's it. A woman who's colored, and that's it. But what did she do?
Chosen another white guy.
So why are we having a conversation about a proverbial glass ceiling being broken?
Well, because I think they're saying that she is the one that's different, if that makes any sense. Because they're saying a diverse roster, but she's already there. So it would have to be whoever she adds to it, right? Like would be her adding some type of diversity that wasn't already existing because she's already been there. So that's that,
That's a great point. You know what I'm thinking? When was the last time that a Black woman who is a person of South Asian descent had been part of this presidency with an old white man?
Yeah, just currently.
Oh,
yeah.
It's the same play.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So there's not any, that's what I'm saying. Like it's not really changing because she's still there. There's
nothing new.
She's the same person. So, because she would be what they're considering the diversity, right? Because the other two are just two white guys. So she's the one who's that, but she's already there. It's not adding anything new. That's just my opinion.
Well, that's kind of one of my points is that there's nothing new happening here. They're literally saying that there's this glass ceiling that it's being shattered. And I'm going, there's nothing new here. There's just absolutely nothing new. So next one, why don't you kick that one off?
A focus on abortion rights. So
back to my comments on the Democratic Party being the party of death. Dr. Albert Mohler is one of my favorite podcasters, specifically somebody who speaks through a biblical Christian worldview. And this comes up quite often, and it's been coming up for years. And I recall when Joe Biden sold his soul in order to get the nomination for the Democratic nomination for president, because he changed his stance. You're right. He changed it vastly.
But even on gay marriage too.
Yeah.
I remember all that. Like it was a lot different when he was with Obama.
Well, Obama changed his stance too.
Yeah, a lot of people have changed their stance on stuff, and I guess it's something normal to like change your stance on things, but it's just weird, I guess, so late in life. You know what I mean? Because it seems like you would know what you believe by age 60 at the time or whatever, however old he was. I don't know.
Yeah, the idea that you can change, I understand.
Yeah, you can.
You get good information and you go, oh, well, my perspective changes. But here's my thing. If you have convictions, make sure that they're predicated on really good evidence and truth and live out by them. Don't be a hypocrite.
I don't even think it's about that though. Sometimes I just think for a lot of these people, it's just about winning.
It is about winning.
And it's just winning in general, in life, right?
I'm going to be more specific. It's about power.
Yeah.
You know what men love?
Power.
Power.
Mm-hmm.
In my current daily role, I know that I have a couple of options. This has come up before. I can make a lot more money, but it's in a role that doesn't have a lot of what? Power.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm a manager.
Yeah.
And I can manage people.
Yeah.
And I get to make decisions with money and people and things and projects. I could go and I could do something else and make more money.
Yeah.
But I like a little bit of power. And not in a perverted, twisted way. That power gives me the ability for me to take what is in my mind and what I think should be done in the real world and execute on that. And it's nice looking at something and going, I think we should tweak this and change that. And I have the power and authority to do so. It's about power. That's why people change their positions. Back to this one here. I think that this is a very wicked movement because they are focusing on abortion. Let's read it. 3 women and I won't mention their names, shared emotional personal stories about abortion and the post-Roe versus Wade America that Mr. Trump's appointees to the Supreme Court helped create in 2022. Praise God for those justices being implemented and having a heart for the unborn. I'm going to stop there and just say that. Trump's appointees to the Supreme Court helped create in 2022. A second Trump term, this is in quotations, would rip away even more of our rights, said Mrs., and I won't read the name, who nearly died in Texas after she was denied an abortion following a miscarriage. They were followed by Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky, who won his race in a red state, in part by defending abortion rights. Research Andy Beshear, you'll understand who he is. Very wicked person as well. And specifically, he's in Kentucky, which is a pretty decently conservative state. But what happens is we'll talk about that later. All women should have the freedom to make their own decisions, Mr. Beshear said, and praised the speakers for their courage. I don't want to seem insensitive on this, but I think we've gone really far with this concept of abortion. And I recall being younger and I had this conversation with one of my children the other night. I remember when this conversation used to be predicated on, incest and rape result in pregnancies and therefore they must be aborted. By the way, I don't agree with that. And I know that's a really hard topic to talk about because it has to do with pain and suffering and evil. And that's a different topic that we can cover one day. But I think that the concept of exchanging evil for evil is just wicked. I was in the book of Romans this morning and it was talking about that we're not supposed to say a bad thing happens so we respond in a bad way, because then what happens is we heap coals on our head. It's a biblical reference of us really punishing ourselves, okay? So this is a super interesting one because did you know, Cora, that Roe versus Wade isn't where this party wants to go?
Mm-mm.
Roe versus Wade had been in place for quite some time. It was a Supreme Court ruling, and really it was all about a women's reproductive rights or health rights, and it was more about abortion. And then the Supreme Court overturned that, and now not only do they want it back, but they want to solidify this, and not in a Roe versus Wade manner, in a much more extreme manner. There is a focus on abortion rights with this group, and we had talked about this on Breaking News, one of our previous podcasts, and I had mentioned that this is the culture of death. I want to be more specific. So I think there's some really good stuff on this. I had one of our family members who listens to the podcast say, Jared, you need to include doctrine and you need to include scripture so people understand, because I said the spirit of Moloch. And I think this is a good time to explain that just really briefly. So I'm going to go on a tangent. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to go to crossexamine.org. This is a really great website for apologetics and truth. And we're going to talk about Moloch in the Bible. The Bible mentions Moloch, or at least references him about 10 times. Here are a couple of examples. This comes from Leviticus 22. Any Israelite or any foreigner residing in Israel who sacrifices any of his children to Moloch is to be put to death. The members of the community are to stone him. Yep, people were doing that back then. Next, Jeremiah 32:35. They built high places for Baal in the valley of Ben Hinnom to sacrifice their sons and daughters to Moloch, though I never commanded, nor did it enter my mind that they should do such a detestable thing and to make Judah sin. You might wonder why the Israelites would be tempted to sacrifice their children to Moloch, as was the case with other ancient gods. Moloch offered them some kind of benefit in exchange for their devotion. By offering up their children to be burned on the golden statue, the Canaanites believed Moloch would cause them and their future children to prosper. Moving on in the article, are Moloch today? I don't know a single person who hears about the horrors of Moloch and doesn't cringe at the gruesomeness. Brutally murdering babies in the name of Moloch for future benefits is evil in the truest sense of the word. Yet at the same time, a large number of people today believe this ancient practice would be fine, so as long as the baby was still in the womb. Just yesterday, New York legislatures passed a law that allows for abortions up until birth after the vote. There was a video that circulated showing hundreds of people cheering loudly in favor of this decision. It's honestly one of the most disgusting scenes I've ever witnessed. What kind of sick and twisted mind does one have to applaud the killing of unborn babies? These are babies after all. As I watched the video, I couldn't help but think about the loud drums drowning out the baby's screams. You know who else supports abortion up into until birth, including afterbirth? Tim Walz. These are things that we need to know because we're going to be under the governance of these folks, and we're not going to have any place to escape.
Yeah.
Right now, you can go to different states. You can go to a blue state. You can go to a red state. What happens when our highest level of government welcomes this kind of wickedness? We ought to be concerned about that. There is a focus on abortion rights, and that should be one of the greatest concerns that we have. Some of the other highlights of the night: civil rights. Jamie Harrison, who leads the Democratic National Committee, opened the convention noting that a black convention chair and a black DNC chair lead us in nominating a black and AAPI woman to be the next president. The Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. was celebrated, appearing briefly on stage, and Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia spoke of his elderly mother voting for him. This man, by the way, spoke out of both sides of his mouth. You didn't get to see this video, correct?
No, I don't think so.
So, Senator Raphael Warnock claims to be a reverend, yet he spoke out of both sides of his mouth because he talked about his daddy being a preacher and him exemplifying some of his daddy's behaviors. And then he says there's not enough room in a physician's office for the patient, physician, and the government. Well, if the government has to step in so that we're not feeding the spirit of Moloch, I would encourage that. Are you still with me?
I think so.
Okay. I want to make sure because we're moving fast, and I feel like I'm excluding you. So feel free if you have anything to add. Don't let me push too far into this terrain. Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't think with some of these subjects, especially because, like I said, this last one I haven't heard, so I don't really have probably a lot to add to that.
If you caught what I said earlier, you have, and this is in quotations, black convention chair and a black DNC chair lead us in nominating a black and AAPI woman to be the next president. There's an obsession with skin color. Are you tired of that?
Yeah, because they're constantly saying that they're going to end racism, but that's kind of what it seems like a lot of this is. Like, I don't understand if it doesn't matter why you have to always bring it up.
Because they're obsessed with it. And it's not healthy. Their idea of inclusivity and diversity leads to further diversity. The bucketizing of races and classes and sexes. I really am frustrated by this concept because you might have missed the nuance here. If you caught it here, they're elevating this race. And by the way, there's only one race. This is actually more, it's not a nationality, but it's an ethnicity.
Yeah.
Okay. And they say black, and that's pretty broad. But they elevated this ethnicity really, really high. You know what happens when you do that? Other ethnicities get lowered.
Yeah.
When I say lowered, they become unimportant. So what is the presidency about now? It's about gender. It's about skin color. Guess what? Qualifications aren't even being spoken of.
Yeah.
You know how sick and tired I am of unqualified people being put into their positions simply because they're a diversity and inclusion hire?
Yeah.
I'm tired of being passed up on jobs because you got somebody else who's a diversity and inclusion candidate and they just happen to be the flavor of the month at that time. Very frustrating. Would you like to take us into the next one?
Labor shows of support.
Labor shows of support. Sean Fain, the president of the powerful United Automobile Workers Union, was one of several speakers representing unions that have endorsed Ms. Harris and underscore her commitment to workers. He took the stage in prime time in a red t-shirt that bluntly proclaimed, "Trump's a scab." In his remarks, Mr. Fain championed a working class at war against the billionaire class and corporate greed. There's nothing new here. There really isn't. There's nothing new here. You still have people who just want to be treated with dignity, who want to be employed, who don't want their country invaded. To me, this is a very non-highlight. But I think the next one is attacking Trump early and often. Speaker after speaker condemned Mr. Trump for his actions in and out of office. Governor Kathy Hochul of New York raised his conviction on 34 felony counts in a Manhattan court. Did you know that this trial that he underwent never should have happened? Mm-mm. It wasn't even a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
There wasn't even a party that was hurt.
Yeah.
There's this concept of a kangaroo court. It's where this is actually what happened to Jesus, okay? You get marched in after you're awakened in the middle of the night. You're beaten and dragged into a court. This is a kangaroo court type process. And then you're falsely accused in front of people. Now, here's my thing. I'm not claiming that Trump is a super squeaky clean guy.
Yeah.
But the question is was this even an offense that should have been pursued? And it was, because the person who actually can't recall the official title for the attorney that oversees that entire district's cases and decides to pursue them. Not attorney general. It's a different name. But anyhow, the person who decided to pursue this built their entire voting base and campaign off of, I'm going to find something to actually convict Trump on. So we hear of these 34 counts, and it's weird. You want to know what's weird? Americans are getting very upset and also very energized by voting for a convict. Do you find that weird?
That they're energized about voting for a convict?
People want to vote for Trump, even though they keep raising this 34 felony count thing that happened in a Manhattan court. And most folks are going, that's kangaroo justice. Mm-hmm. We all know that that's false. It's not just. That's the way to put it. So what's happening right now is a lot of folks are saying we should just go ahead and vote for a convict over somebody who we know was actually just instilled through a coup.
Yeah.
So here it says 34 felony counts in the Manhattan court. Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas contrasted Mrs. Harris' career with Mr. Trump, saying that she became a career prosecutor while he became a career criminal. I mean, a lot of this just demonstrates that these folks have so much hatred. They have so much hatred for one person. And by the way, that one person stands for values that I think you and I stand for. Would you agree?
You're talking about Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah. For the most part, yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, not everything, but there's a lot there.
Constitution, sovereignty, free market enterprise, I think conservatism with the justices. There's a lot of things that he stands for. So whenever the Democratic Party is attacking Trump, he's attacking a huge voter base that is just tired and sick of the swamp. And we want to see that thing drained. And then last, we see a few more things here. Smaller than expected protests. In case you didn't know, I think it was back in 1968 where there was massive protests that actually really derailed the Democratic National Convention. I'm trying to think. I don't know if it was Humphrey and Nixon, but what ended up happening was there was a landslide for, I believe, Nixon because of those protests. It demonstrated quite the opposite, that there wasn't a lot of control and we needed more of that in our government. And that was happening, I believe, around the Vietnam era war. And so that was a really big thing. And they were expecting that to happen. That's why they're saying smaller than expected protests, right? Because they were expecting really bad things to happen and that whole thing to become derailed. And then lastly, it says, from one another, the Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr took the stage to praise Miss Harris's fresh from leading the U.S. men's basketball team to Olympic gold medal in Paris. Leadership, real leadership, Mr. Kerr said, is not the kind that seeks to divide us, but the kind that recognizes and celebrates our common purpose. He also praises Mrs. Harris's running mate, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, a one-time high school football coach. Coach to coach, that guy's awesome. Mr. Kerr said, well, I don't think that guy's awesome. And I think that he has the spirit of Moloch in him. And more than anything, going back to what Coach Kerr had said, not the kind that seeks to divide us. I would say that the Democratic Party is highly divisive. And they divide based on race. They divide based on skin color. They divide based on economic status. They divide based on gender. And I think that they are a super divisive party. And I'm tired of folks saying that they're the party of unity when really what they use is things like identity politics, intersectionality, critical race theory. These are the kind of things that are being injected into institutions that are governmental funded. Very, very frustrating. Any final thoughts from you, Cora?
No, I don't think I have any final thoughts.
Did you enjoy today's podcast?
Yeah.
Well, do you have any encouragement for our listeners?
I don't think I could think of anything.
Okay.
Encouragement?
Yeah.
No, I can't think of anything right now. You just put me on the spot. I can't think of anything.
Okay.
Do you have any encouragement for our listeners?
I absolutely do have encouragement for our listeners. And through that awkward moment, I just want to share that it's Cora's desire to start engaging more. She feels like she has to have all the knowledge, and it's not about that. It's more about talking through these issues.
Well, and some of these topics are more your topics, not really topics that I personally like. So,
well, you don't have to like a topic to talk about it. You just got to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm just saying it seems like I'm not very talkative, then sometimes it's just because I'm trying, but I'm not. Well, I'm trying to figure out how to engage right on topics that I'm not so informed about.
It's very fair, and I think you're doing an amazing job, and I want to commend you on that.
Thank you.
Here's my encouragement for our listeners. Every one of you that is out there who has an opportunity to hear this podcast, stay awake, be vigilant, and look for the nuances and details. We are going through things right now that I think are life-altering. In the next 77 days, we're going to see things that are going to demonstrate where we are going as a country, and more specifically, what sort of rights we are going to be having in the future. I do think that we have rights right now that we rely on that are at stake. I believe our Constitution is at stake. I believe that our children's well-being is at stake. And we're seeing these things in policies that are being implemented by these folks. So we must and we need to remain vigilant and awake. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We aim to help others live a dedicated, devoted life. If you want to come alongside us in partnership, please check out DedicatedDevoted.com and make sure to subscribe. If you want to add any commentary or if you have any questions, please send them to jared@DedicatedDevoted.com. Join us next time for another episode of Dedicated Devoted. We post an episode every week, and we hope that you join us soon. Thank you, and God bless.